Welcome to Dr Joe Unplugged. The topics discussed in this podcast will reflect my opinions and are not in any way to be regarded as medical advice. Mythology dies hard in medicine. It's funny, you hear a lot about medicine being scientific and a lot about it being evidence-based, and we don't have evidence, then we can't do something. And to some degree, that is true. But I was actually chatting with a colleague yesterday and I was reminded of a line I read many years ago, and I wish I could remember who had said it, that medicine is much more eminence-based than evidence-based. So if somebody with professor in front of their name or an alphabet after their name says something, everybody's meant to go along. And sometimes they're right, but they're not always right. And we saw that at the beginning of the decade, that if you happened to be a doctor who really wasn't fit to practice as a doctor but could work as a bureaucrat, that nobody was allowed to question them. And when new evidence comes to mind or to light, it's changing and accepting that what we've done is, if not wrong, because people believed it at the time, but like as we spoke in a previous podcast, at some point people believed the earth is flat. That was their genuine belief. And when evidence was produced to show that it wasn't, we know initially there's a lot of resistance, and then people do fall into line. But it's been known for a long time that the body mass index, or BMI, and that is a calculation of your weight in kilograms divided by the square of your height, that's your height multiplied by your height in metres, is a useless measure. Now, we can all feel it ourselves and we can all know when somebody is significantly overweight, that is true. But the body mass index, which defines overweight as above 25, grossly overstates the number of people who are overweight. And between 25 and 30, there is no impact, none, nada, zip, on all-cause mortality. So when you hear these figures that 2/3 or 3/4 or so of the population are overweight or obese, 3/4 of those are in this 25 to 30 bracket. And if you want to go to, in Australia, any AFL, NRL, A-League team in America, hockey, football, in the England Premier League, any sport, and you do BMI measurements on all the players, they will all be overweight or obese. Arnold Schwarzenegger was technically obese when he won the Mr. Olympus title, because body mass index doesn't take any account of body habitus. So it doesn't account for body mass, muscle versus body fat. And that does matter. So there's a new idea has come through, the body roundness index, and should the body roundness index replace the BMI? And there's a story on Medscape, which we'll put in the description below. Several studies have suggested that BRI could be a valuable tool for assessing health risks. In June of this year, that's 2024, researchers reported a U-shape association between BRI and overall mortality. Again, obviously, if you're significantly underweight, that's a problem. If you're roughly in the right shape, that's good. And if there's too much sitting around the middle, then that's not so good. And there's been work done on this for a while. Now, the calculation, unfortunately, is a little bit complicated, and it involves a square root and n and something else. So probably for day-to-day, for most people, it is going to be a little bit complicated. But there is a solution to that, which is the waist-hip ratio. And the waist-hip ratio is the measurement of your waist at the thinnest point, sort of either around the navel or just below, divided by your hip, and this is all in centimetres. And for men, ideally below 0.9, for women, ideally below 0.85, men better below 1, men better below 0.9. But again, not everybody has the exact same body shape. And that's something you can do with a tape measure at home. You don't even need to go to a doctor to do that. It is as simple as jumping on the scales. The other really simple way to know if you are making some impact in your middle, and if that is something that you want to do, and obviously not everybody wants to and not everybody has to, is pulling the belt in. Like if your belt's on the next notch, or if you're finding that your pants are getting loose, that's telling you that when you're wanting to reduce weight, that you're reducing it where you want to. And one of the concerns with the semaglutide and some of these other new weight loss medications, which do have a role, I'm not saying they don't have a role, they do, but people can end up losing a degree of muscle rather than body fat, and that is not good when we're wanting to lose weight. Even if there's not much change on the scales, if there's change in your body composition, that is making you more healthy. But of course, there's a step before that too, which is that up until Big Public Health introduced the low-fat dietary guidelines in the early 80s, we didn't have a whole lot of people carrying more weight than most of them would like to. Which in turn, and I've probably said this before, and I've no doubt that I will say it again in future podcasts, is there is a very, very simple way to manage this, and that is to eat like your grandparents or great-grandparents ate, which is essentially meat, fish, chicken, vegetable proteins for those that way inclined, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, berries, drink mainly water. Now, can you have some bread? Yes, you can. Can you, have some processed foods? Yeah, a little bit, but not too much. If most of what we eat comes from around the perimeter of the supermarket, we're in a better situation if we've got a lot of food that comes in boxes and packages with lots of numbers on it. And it doesn't matter how many elephant stamps it gets from the government or from Big Public Health. It doesn't matter. It doesn't. And we don't have a lot of those sorts of foods, particularly those that are ultra-processed and have a lot of sugar and a lot of chemicals. And regardless of what people think about him, we don't have to agree with everything he says. RFK Jr. in his new position, or to be appointed, assuming he gets confirmed, as Health Secretary in the US, has certainly made it one of his priorities to look at the food industry and the use of chemicals, additives and sugars, and particularly high fructose corn syrup in the United States. And hopefully he gets to do that. And I really want to emphasise that we don't have to agree with all of his positions to be pretty united on this one. Alrighty, take-home messages. Let's keep it simple. A lot of people after Christmas in particular often wanting to lose a few kilos, and if you are, then there's some simple ways of doing that, and it is cutting out a lot of the sugary processed foods before Christmas. If you indulge a bit, look, it's not the end of the world. Don't overdo it, but it's not the end of the world. And rather than listen to the bleatings of Big Public Health about the body mass index, that basically needs to go the way of the flat Earth theory. Unfortunately, as I said at the outset, myths in medicine die hard, and there's a lot of people clinging to it. There's a lot of reputations, a lot of money at stake. Surprise, surprise. But for you, in charge of your own health, look at what's going on around your middle, if that's of your interest to you. Eat foods that until fairly recently were moving around somewhere or growing somewhere. Drink mainly water, and be guided by your clothes. Thanks for listening to Dr. Joe Unplugged. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, share, and consider subscribing. Tell your friends. If there are topics you'd like to see covered, be in touch through the chat or email info@drjoe.net.au. We'll be uploading new content each Monday, and soon we'll be putting these videos out on X. You can follow me there at Dr. Joe's DIY Health.